Welcome to the Imagine Austin speaker series. Before we begin our presentation, we'll start off with some instructions for language access.
Hey everyone, this is going to be a multilingual event, so everyone needs to select their preferred language. If you're on your computer, you will see a globe icon at the bottom of your screen. If you're on your tablet or phone, click the three dots, More Language Interpretation, and select your preferred language. Don't forget to press Done. Este será un evento multilingüe. Todos deben escoger su idioma preferido. Si están en sus computadoras, presionen el icono del globo en la parte de abajo de su pantalla. Si están en sus teléfonos o tabletas, hagan clic en los tres puntitos más or more. Seleccionen interpretación de idiomas y su idioma preferido. No olviden presionar listo.
My name is Sam Henstel, and I am a senior planner with the City of Austin's Housing and Planning Department. Welcome to today's Imagine Austin speaker series. Before we start the presentation, we'd like to go over a few meeting logistics and housekeeping items. First, today we have on-screen live captioning. To view the live captioning, click the CC icon below. If you are on a mobile device, you may need to click the three dots to open the menu bar further. If at any time you need assistance, you may send a direct message to the production team in the chat, and we will do our best to respond right away. Drop us a note to ask for help or if you missed any of the instructions. Thank you very much for your attention. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted later on the Imagine Austin Speaker Series website. Our format will be a presentation by the speaker, followed by a question and answer session on the Watershed Protection Department's Rain to River community engagement process. Your question should be entered in the Zoom Q&A widget, which we'll get to after the presentation. To improve streaming quality and ease of viewing, only the speaker's cameras and mics will be enabled. Please don't forget to fill out the survey at the end of our event. We use surveys to help improve programming and receive suggestions for new topics and speakers. Again, welcome to today's webinar titled Partnering with Community Leaders, Equity-Focused Approaches to Community Engagement for the Rain to River Strategic Plan Update. The Imagine Austin Speaker Series at its core is the opportunity to promote and implement the policies of the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan, the City of Austin's 30-year plan for the future, through shared dialogue and mutual learning. We accomplish this by inviting local and national thought leaders to give talks several times a year in fields such as land use, public health, housing, social equity, environmental sustainability, and transportation and mobility. Today's event sponsor is the City of Austin's Housing and Planning Department, and our co-sponsor is the Watershed Protection Department. I'm now going to pass it off to our speaker, Sari Albornoz, she, her, a community engagement planner with the Watershed Protection Department, who has been working on the strategic plan update, Rain to River.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation. As Sam mentioned, my name is Sari Albornoz. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a planner with the Watershed Protection Department. My role is to lead the community engagement effort for Rain to River, Watershed's process to update our department-wide strategic plan. So today, I'm really excited to share with you about the equity-focused community engagement approach that our department is using for Rain to River. And with the help of three panelists, I'll highlight two engagement strategies, a community ambassador program and a mini grant program for partner organizations that our department is using to help us engage with communities who have often been left out of city planning processes. To begin, I'll share about the Rain to River planning process and our goals and strategies for community engagement. I'll also introduce the two programs we're featuring today. I'll share some insights my Watershed colleagues and I have gained so far through implementing these programs. Then we'll shift into a discussion with our three panelists, who include two community ambassadors, Fez Baguesa and Mirna Rodriguez, and one partner organization leader, Danielle Reichman, to hear what they've learned from Austin community members about their experiences and priorities related to flooding, erosion, and water pollution. Before I dive into the presentation, I want to acknowledge that the work I'm presenting to you today is very much a collaborative effort. The rest of the watershed planning team, other staff across our department, and even dedicated community members like the 3 panelists you'll meet today are contributing to this planning process. Rabab Babi Zaidi, Community Ambassador Coach, and Erin Wood, who leads our planning team, co-created this presentation and are helping to make this webinar happen behind the scenes. I also want to thank our interpreters at Language Access Austin for helping us make this a bilingual event, and our colleagues at the Housing and Planning Department for inviting us to co-host. Now to dive in. So I'll begin with a little bit of background. Our department's mission is to protect lives, property, and the environment of our community by reducing the impact of flooding, erosion, and water pollution. Our work helps keep Austin's creeks and lakes healthy and clean, prevents creek banks from eroding, and strives to keep people and their homes safe from flooding. We do this through activities like performing modeling to figure out what buildings and roads are at risk of flooding, conducting ecological research and restoration, inspecting and maintaining the city's drainage infrastructure, building capital improvement projects like shoring up eroding creek banks or installing rain gardens or new storm drain systems, and writing regulations that help prevent future problems, like requirements that limit building houses in the floodplain. Our department's strategic plan does several things. First, it acts as a guiding blueprint for our department. It sets goals and objectives for our work. It establishes how we prioritize problems, and it helps us identify potential solutions. Second, it provides a framework for evaluating future programs, projects, and regulations, as well as measuring our success toward achieving our goals and objectives. And third, it serves as a communication tool to help explain our work and priorities to watershed staff, other departments, city council, and the Austin community. A quick note about the strategic plan. We used to call this document the Watershed Protection Master Plan, but like many departments, we are moving away from using the term master plan because for many it calls to mind Austin's racist and harmful 1928 master plan. We have 3 primary goals as we update the strategic plan. First, we want the new plan to reflect community values, the goals, priorities, knowledge, and experience of the Austin community. Second, we want the plan to incorporate equity and climate resilience. And third, we want the new plan to be accessible and informative to a broad audience. Our current plan is 400 pages long and pretty technical, and we're hoping to create a document that will both serve as a blueprint for the department's operations and be understandable and informative for a broader community. So Rain to River will start with the vision and values of the community. We're building the updated plan on a foundation of community engagement. Our goals for the community engagement process are, first, to be respectful to participants. We're doing our best to make it easy and enjoyable to participate, for example, by using a user-friendly survey and interviewing people in their neighborhoods. We're striving for transparency about how we will use people's feedback, so we'll create a report summarizing the input we're gathering, and we'll share this back to the community. And we're using strategies that are tailored for specific groups or topics. We want to make sure we're doing things that are appropriate for the audience. Second, we are setting out to use, or we are using, an adaptive process. We've defined metrics for success, and we're using them to track how we're doing so that we can adjust our approach as needed along the way, and we have adjusted. A big part of this.
Hi, sorry, just to jump in really quick, our interpreters are asking if we could slow down a lot more.
Thanks. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course. So a big part of this is making sure we're meeting our goal to hear from a mix of Austin residents that reflects the diversity of our city. We've worked to adapt to challenges and constraints that have been caused by stressors like the COVID-19 pandemic and the winter storms we've experienced in recent years. And we're coordinating and collaborating with other organizations on our community engagement efforts. Third, we're striving to focus the process on building long-term relationships and trust, especially with historically underserved groups and groups impacted by negative watershed outcomes. We've been building new relationships with organizations and individuals and creating systems to gather input from historically underserved communities that we'll be using beyond this planning process. To make the Rain to River process more equitable, we are prioritizing seeking input from certain groups. Past watershed planning efforts have not explicitly prioritized engaging people of color, low-income communities, and other groups more likely to experience negative quality of life outcomes in Austin. But this time, we're doing just that. We're dedicating more funding and staff time to reaching these groups, knowing it will take extra effort to ensure we do so effectively. Our community and engagement process prioritizes 3 groups. First, underserved groups. These are residents who have systematically been marginalized from or denied a full opportunity to participate in past planning and decision-making processes and/or who are more likely to experience negative quality of life outcomes. Among others, this group includes people of color, low-income people, and non-English speakers, immigrants, and refugees. Second, watershed impacted groups. These are residents who have experienced or are at an increased risk of experiencing impacts of negative watershed outcomes, including flooding, erosion, and water pollution. Finally, our third priority stakeholder group is organizations that work on issues related to the environment, community health, and public safety. This group also includes governmental and institutional partners. But because our goal is to reach a representative sample of the Austin community, we're also using broad engagement strategies like surveys and meetings that are open and accessible to everyone. As I've mentioned, we're using a variety of engagement strategies for Rain to River. Many of the strategies we're using to reach our priority stakeholders are new for Watershed and therefore pretty exciting for us. Some of these are tailored strategies that require more time and resources to carry out. These include a compensated cohort of community ambassadors, mini grants for partner organizations, compensated focus groups, participating in meetings and events of communities where our priority stakeholders are represented, and one-on-one meetings with community leaders and organizations. Broader strategies we're using for all stakeholders include surveys, online educational events, paid advertisements, and a website and web-based communications, among others. Our team has been busy at work, getting the word out and gathering input over the past year. These slides capture a bit of what we've been up to. So we've recruited ambassadors, we've been on the news, we've done a launch, we've been on social media, and we have been at a lot of community events. And of course, 2 of the strategies we're most excited about are the ones we're highlighting today. So I'll begin with the Community Ambassador Program. The objective of the Ambassador Program was to get help engaging with underserved communities by collaborating with individuals who already have strong networks within those communities. We understand that members of the communities we're trying to reach may distrust government, and so staff are not always the best people to venture out seeking input. We wanted to work with and compensate people better equipped to do this work than we are. Our ambassador program launched July of last year and ran through November. We brought on Bobby Zadie, as you see on the right side on the picture, as a full-time temporary employee to serve as coordinator for the program. We brought on 10 ambassadors who each were compensated $25 an hour to work up to 80 hours. And we also provided each ambassador with a $500 budget to use for things like supplies and incentives for community members. Each ambassador gathered qualitative data by collecting one-on-one interviews with community members. Ambassadors asked people about their experiences, values, and priorities related to watershed issues, as well as about flooding, erosion, and water pollution, and related issues like affordability and climate change. Each ambassador interviewed about 30 people and prepared monthly reports that synthesized their findings. Bobby and the rest of our team are currently working on a report summarizing the ambassadors' findings, which we'll be sharing this spring. It'll be a priority for us to make sure we share this report back with community members who shared their input. The ambassadors used a variety of strategies to get the word out about Rain to River and the opportunity to participate in an interview. They also shared what they learned with the Rain to River Steering Committee and fielded questions from committee members, which you'll see in the picture on the upper right. And then this is Fez Bagueza, who you'll hear from shortly. He's one of our panelists. And This is kind of showing him at work, and then Mirna Rodriguez, one of our other panelists, is also in the picture on the upper right. And then here are some pictures of Mirna at work, also talking with community members. So with the partner organization mini grant program, we're taking a slightly different approach toward the same goal that we had in mind for the community ambassador program. Reach and gather input from underserved communities by partnering with familiar, trusted community leaders. This program launched in January and will run through the end of April. We've awarded $5,000 mini grants to 6 local organizations, which you'll see listed on the slide, each of which serves a little bit of a different underserved community. We've structured data collection a bit less for this group. We've asked the partner organizations to use strategies that they think will be the most effective for the communities they serve. And the organizations are using a variety of methods. So they're using focus groups, door knocking, video recorded one-on-one interviews, and discussions at community events, for example. Organizations are providing our team with their raw data and also synthesizing their findings in monthly reports. Once the findings in a report that we'll share back with the community. So as I mentioned, gathering input looks a little bit different for each of the partner organizations. Queertopia, who we'll hear from today, will distribute care packages, which you see some staff and Queertopia volunteers assembling in this picture, to people experiencing homelessness as a thank you for sharing their input for Rain to River. And then the Del Valley Community Coalition provided an interactive way to participate in a survey for Rain to River at one of their community events, which was the launch of a free fridge back in January. The community ambassador and partner organization programs have already served as incredibly valuable learning experiences for our Rain to River team. In many respects, these programs have been successful for us. First, we've learned a lot from community members' input. We've gained some unexpected insights via the lived experiences people have shared. For example, we've learned that people value spending time at creeks and lakes for recreation and for the restorative effects of spending time in nature. But displacement from the central part of the city makes it more difficult for people to access these places. And the cost of visiting places like Lady Bird Lake and Barton Springs is actually prohibitive for many people. People also feel fatigue and a lack of trust of the city due to decades of perceived inaction. But communities have been resilient in absence of support from the city, and in emergencies, community members are seeking support from their neighbors and community entities before the city. Community members' input has also underscored the importance of some issues that are already on our radar, like trash and algae as a barrier to enjoying creeks and lakes, lack of trust of the 311 system for reporting issues to the city, and the fact that homelessness is a big issue, both in terms of the safety of people experiencing homelessness and also in terms of a perceived threat to the safety of visitors to water spaces. Beyond the data, our community ambassadors and partner organizations have also helped us build a robust network, a robust and new network with community members, which we'll take care to maintain through the end of Rain to River and beyond. Finally, the work of the community ambassadors and partner organizations has also resulted in a significant amount of education and awareness building about watershed and other city services, especially 311. We've also experienced some challenges as we've implemented these programs. Because these programs are new to watershed and relatively new across city departments, protocols weren't readily available for many of the administrative processes that were involved in launching and managing the programs, including important processes like paying ambassadors. So we had to be creative and do our research. Also, unforeseeable circumstances prevented some of the community ambassadors from finishing out the program, so we actually ended up with a little less data than we'd hoped for at the beginning. And then partly because of COVID-19 and partly because of differing schedules, it was challenging to find times for staff and community ambassadors to meet. We had been hoping to organize, we were able to organize a meeting where ambassadors shared their findings with the Rain to River Steering Committee, but we had hoped for more opportunities for dialogues between decision-making staff and ambassadors. And we've also learned some lessons so far. First, we learned that hiring a full-time coordinator for the Community Ambassador Program, which was Bobby Zadie, was wise. We had been strongly advised to hire a full-time coordinator by other city departments that had tried ambassador programs before us, and they were right. We have been very grateful to have Bobby's staff bandwidth to provide consistent communication with ambassadors and to push forward through the administrative hurdles that we experienced along the way. Second, we learned that we should maximize opportunities for ambassadors and organizations to collaborate and learn from each other. They have expressed to us that time spent together sharing ideas, troubleshooting, and networking has been valuable. Third, we learned we should provide a balance of structure and flexibility. Ambassadors and organizations have appreciated specific guidance about questions to ask community members and about our expectations for how to present data that they collect. And also, we've needed to adjust some of our original expectations for the program. For example, we adjusted the amount of data we asked ambassadors to gather after we realized the original ask was just not realistic. Finally, we learned we need to build in ways for ambassadors and organizations to close the communication loop with the communities that they engage. And ideally, we would have done this on the front end. Ambassadors and organizations feel accountable to the communities from whom they've collected data and want to ensure that they can communicate back to community members about what will happen as a result of their input. So with that context, it's now time to shift into our panel discussion, so you can hear directly from participants in the Community Ambassador and Partner Organization programs. So I'm really excited to introduce our three panelists. Fez Varghese has served as a community ambassador and primarily engaged community members in Dove Springs and in North Austin, including members of his Muslim community. Mirna Rodriguez also served as a community ambassador, and she engaged primarily Spanish-speaking residents of the Dove Springs neighborhood in Southeast Austin. And Danielle Reichman is co-founder of Queertopia, which is a partner organization. Queertopia is an LGBTQ+ led community organization focusing on homelessness through an anti-racist lens. And Queertopia's mission is community empowerment led by amplifying and celebrating queer, trans, Black, Indigenous, and people of color voices and taking direct action to combat housing inequity. Danielle will focus on engaging people experiencing homelessness, especially queer, trans, Black, Indigenous, and people of color community members. And these images show Queertopia in action. A quick note, the partner organizations are earlier on in their data collection process, and also Queertopia's data collection has been delayed because our team took the extra and unexpectedly time-consuming step of creating care packages to distribute at encampments. And so because of this, Danielle is going to speak mostly from her own extensive experience for this discussion. So let's get started with our questions. Fez, I will go ahead and start with you. So why did you want to become a Rain to River community ambassador?
All right, let me click on my camera here. Hey, good afternoon. So it's a very good question. So as you mentioned, I live in the Dove Springs community, and I've lived here now for over 22 years. Father of four, and even kids went to Perez Elementary, which is down from Pleasant Valley. So the real reason I joined was back in 2013, Halloween. Everyone probably knows the event, and I think we also slide on slide number 10 in the presentation. And that was a screenshot of Onion Creek and the flooding that took place during that time frame. Now, that was the second time that I knew of while living in a community that area flooded. And what occurred, although I was not directly affected, I had family and friends that were. And when this took place the day of, I tried to go down and see where I could help my community members who really needed help. Like there were discussions about, people being on top of their rooftops and not getting the assistance that they needed. So I went down to do what I could to help. And I was met with a barrier, tried to many ways of going around to help my neighbor, but ultimately ended up having to go through a third party company in order to be able to help my neighbor. So as a result of that, and really wanting to make sure that we have diversity present in all of our discussions when it comes to watershed, especially those that affect our community and those that have typically not been served. So really that was the driving force of why I wanted to become part of this program and give my opinion, especially after coming through with some of the interviews.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Okay, let's move on to Mirna. Why did you want to become a Rain to River Community Ambassador, Mirna?
Hola, buenas tardes. Soy Mirna Rodríguez.
Good afternoon. My name is Mirna Rodriguez. I love the opportunity of being a community ambassador because I have lived in Dove Spring. That's where my children were born. I have 5 children. They went to Wilton Elementary, so I'm always been part of this community. I thought that it would be a great opportunity to engage, to speak to my community because I've lived here, and many things have happened here. Especially what we struggle with are the floodings in 2015. It was really hard. I was helping, dragging carpets and the stuff that was ruined by people. Some people passed away, and there was a member. There is she works for GABA. This person, and we have a group of volunteers helping. It was my community, and every time that there is a flooding, I see this happening. So I wanted to participate. I love the program, and that's what I made the decision to help the community and to reach out to doors where where it has never been reached, so they had the communication that maybe I had hoped for. So this is something that has impressed me so much, what people had share, and then the fact that each one of them opened their hearts. So I love the opportunity to reach in people's hearts, my neighbors, people who I think they have forgotten that they are low income, displaced, people of color, and Latinos. So those are the people that are forgotten. We are considered at last. That's what I love the program.
Thank you so much, Mirna. Okay, let's pass it on to Danielle. Why did you want to become a Rain to River partner organization?
So I wanted to become I want Queertopia to be a partner organization because we specifically work with unhoused, primarily Black Austinites that have been gentrified out of their homes, who are normally not given the opportunity to voice their opinions or have their knowledge heard by the city. I want the city to understand that it is critical every single time it rains. Not sorry, I have a dog. He's chewing a bone behind me. I want the city to understand that it's critical every single time it rains for the unhoused community, regardless of if someone is sleeping in a creek bed or just literally wherever, like on a bench or anything. Your life restarts every single time it rains because everything that you have gets destroyed, which we'll talk about later during question 3. But that's the reason why I wanted to participate.
Thank you so much. Okay, so the second question is for the ambassadors. We'll start with Fez. What were a few common themes or topics that you heard from community members who you talked with?
So let's see here. So I would start off with the overreaching topic here, and that was in any and all the communities that I visited, whether it was North Austin, Dove Springs, or any of the items in between. The far-reaching seemed to be utilization and knowledge of the 311 service. Some of the things that and it was a general question that we would ask in those situations. It was simply, if there were a flooding event or some drainage issues around here, who would you call? Who would you reach out to? And the consensus was they would call 911 in a lot of the situations. Then the others, they just had no idea at all. They also had no idea of what services were being offered. So, whether it was a drainage issue or, an issue with the sidewalk or the road, they didn't know what the full gamut of the services that the city of Austin offers via the 311 app. And I mentioned this also, it affected everyone, not only from those that were experiencing homelessness, but also even found some of the folks in my own neighborhood here with this recent brush pickup. They didn't know how to get those things picked up, and educate a lot of them about 311. And some of them mentioned that when they did call, they were on hold for a long time. So then I educated them about the application. So they just kind of demonstrated that that there is a big opportunity to provide a little more education on the 311 app, what it could be used for, and so on and so forth. Some of the other topics that I ran across, and this is primarily focused on um, diversity in some of the larger bodies of water, like Lady Bird Lake. And it was mainly catered towards, people of colors. Like when you go out, do you feel like you fit in this area? And the majority of the folks that I spoke with were like, I don't feel like sometimes I belong in these areas. And what we kind of got down to, and what I found through this was, just not being comfortable in the water. And that boiled down to the potential of, swimming lessons and things like that. Just having the opportunity to have something like that, from the city or whatnot. Looking around, they mentioned some of the options they have now, costs. They mentioned like YMCA and a few other organizations, but they cost money for something that's really basically a life skill, being able to swim. So that was something that came out of that. The other ones were focused around those experiencing homelessness, and the concerns there were, a lot of them live in areas near bodies of water, um, and during events where flooding may take place, there are no warning systems to alert them that they should seek higher ground, or get somewhere safe. So there was a lot of discussion about how do we make sure that we're secure in those types of situations, and that happened in the majority of the talks that I had with those experiencing homelessness. So those are, I think, the three far-reaching items that I got out of the themes so far with some of the interviews that I went through.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing
Uh-huh.
that. Okay, so let's move on to Mirna. What were a few common themes or topics that you heard from the community members you talked with?
Bueno, sobre
Um,
todo
what I heard, the most common thing I heard from people were complaints. There was not a lot of help. The flooding, 311. And I also heard a lot about how sometimes they called and people spoke English, so the communication.
I'm sorry, can we perhaps pause for a second? Unless it's just me, it sounds like I'm hearing the interpretation in the English channel as well. For our interpreters, can you confirm that you're both in the Spanish channel? And apologies if that's just on my end.
We are interpreting into English because she's speaking Spanish, so you should be hearing us.
I'm so sorry.
Yes.
Wear too many hats. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
You can go ahead, Mirna.
Okay. Ya escuché el problema de la
So I was hearing the problem of communication when there's like an emergency in the community and people like call for help in 311, and when their house get flooded, issues with transportation. And there's something that I also stood out to me was the Onion Creek. The, the erosion is just increasing, and a mom told me that so that her kid goes to Mendes and she skips schools, and there's this part that's really eroded, and so the kids go and hang out there and hide. So there's a lot of issues with like trash, people experiencing homelessness, and they talked a lot about the lack of communication, the lack of help, support, and most people feel forgotten. So these were some of the main topics that I heard in the community, given the barrier of language, because they feel that they're forgotten community. And also there's a lot of people don't ask for help because they're afraid. They think that, but sadly, that they think that the city is immigration. So a lot of people in Dove Springs, so many Latin communities, they need a little bit of education. Those were some of the topics I heard. uh, Fear, lack of communication, they refuse to ask for help. And many of these communities have suffered a lot because they have lost their homes and they don't even know how to ask for FEMA support or help. That's what I heard mainly.
Thank you so much, Birna. Super interesting insights. Okay, so the third question we have is for Queertopia, and also we're going to ask Chris to speak to it because he spoke a lot with people experiencing homelessness. But we'll start with Danny. Could you please speak to what issues related to flooding, erosion, or water quality are particularly important for people experiencing homelessness?
Yeah, and Fez, I don't know if you want to maybe put your camera on, though. If you have something you want to say, you can like nod or something, so I can be like, pass over to you or something.
I'll leave it on, but I'll let you lead with it, and I can just piggyback off of anything you mentioned there, because I think we shared a lot of results and what you're going to mention here.
Cool. Yeah, the morning session was just like a little different than this one. So all right. So it's hard for me to separate 3 and 4. So I'm probably going to end up like talking about them together, like what should be implemented at the same time. So some of the things that we talked about in the earlier session were like basically like every single time it rains, regardless if it's like a light rain or a heavy rain or flooding, all of your documents get completely destroyed when you're experiencing homelessness. Like typically you have to carry everything with you, and you need each of these documents to get housing, and you have to get each of these documents that take a different amount of time to get in a specific order to get all of them. The Rain to River care packages that we made together actually have like waterproof backpacks, like with like a waterproof pouch in it for the documents, which was really important to us. So I was like really thankful that we got to collaborate so much with like exactly what was ordered for those care packages. But like even with those, people are only going to have those backpacks for a limited amount of time before they get destroyed. There are a number of places that do store documents, but they're all south. They're all downtown or south. So there's literally nothing north for anyone who wants to store their documents. So it's all like downtown Austin Community Court or Trinity Center or Sunrise or places like that, which is like, it's a great service that they offer, but there's nothing if you live north. And it's also like, it does feel like a little demeaning to have someone else holding your documents that you don't really know that well, instead of like yourself or wherever you live, because where you live is nowhere at this point because you don't even get to have a tent anymore. So I would say like documents is like a huge issue because literally you have to restart your housing journey every time it rains. Another issue is just general health. Like as soon as it rains, like your feet are the first thing to go. If you've worked with anyone experiencing homelessness, like the first thing you'll notice is the condition of people's feet, and how long it takes like your feet to recover once you actually move back indoors. But it's just like, and how a lot of people don't know their shoe size because it fluctuates between multiple shoe sizes depending on how much your feet have swelled that day. But like just think about like when you're out and about, like just, I don't know, wherever, like at a park or just wherever you don't have immediate access to a car, if it rains, you're just like, oh no, my feet are wet, my day is ruined. But when you're experiencing homelessness, you're like, oh, life is ruined because like every single time it rains and your feet are just wet. And then there's nowhere to sleep when it's raining because you aren't allowed to have a tent anymore. So you're just supposed to sleep in what, like a wet pile of slop on the ground. And even when tents were allowed, they're not like a permanent solution. They're obviously a band-aid harm reduction solution, because like they get destroyed over and over and over again. And it's just like it just like contributes to uh like like the trash and everything like that that we see throughout Austin, because there's just nowhere for anyone experiencing Austin to put trash. So it's just like their tents and their belongings and everything just consistently get destroyed from inclement weather. There's nowhere for them to put it once it's destroyed. Everyone gets mad at them because there's trash places, but there's no trash cans to put anything, and there's no trash pickup services for anyone. Like I came from New York, where there's a trash can at the corner of every single street, and when I came here, I was very shocked that there's no trash bins anywhere. Like you can walk like 8 city blocks and not see a trash can. And like like the St. John's community, when we were working there, like they organized multiple like trash pickups where they would clean the entire camp, and the city would tell them like, okay, like put all the bundled trash like in one specific area, and we will send a crew out, like a city trash crew out to pick it all up. And then they wouldn't send them for like 2 weeks, and then people would like take photos of the piles of trash in the spots where they were told to put them to harass them. So there's just like no winning. And all that trash, like not having anywhere to put it, just it affects water quality, it affects the soil, it affects everything. Sorry, was there anything else? I'm sure that there was, but I can't remember.
I think you just said it all very concisely and
Yeah.
in an organized fashion.
Oh, and then like people like literally aren't allowed to use bathrooms. So people are like, oh, why are there people urinating in public? And it's like, because literally they're not allowed to use bathrooms. People have to wash off in public sinks because they can't use a bathroom. Like we should be embarrassed as a society that we aren't kinder to humans. Like,
Yep. And I can also piggyback off of some of the items around the trash and such, because some of the feedback that I received is, when these areas where these encampments are, and we talked about this earlier, homelessness as a whole is going to be a tough nut to crack, for the city. But there's things that can be done to mitigate that in the meantime, and that includes some of the trash bins. Because the feedback that I received is during these raining events or flooding events, all that trash should be just kind of thrown all over the place and really affect, like you mentioned, that quality of water in those areas. The other item I did want to mention was the other feedback we received is just concern, and I touched on this earlier, concern that our early warning notification systems, if you had your phone last week or so when we had those conditions happen, every one of my phones were getting blown up with alerts. I was getting emails. But the question became, what happens to those that are experiencing homelessness, who may not have a phone? Now, I know that, and this is based off of discussion with Danielle, because I in no way, shape, or form an expert on any of this, but it just kind of happened that some of my best interviewees were those that were experiencing homelessness. But the feedback was, what happens when I don't have a phone in that area? When it starts to flood. So the concern is, what can we do to help get notification to those experiencing homelessness in those camps when these things are occurring like that? And there's more I can talk on once we get to that, in terms of thoughts of what we can see implemented to improve on that. But that was by far, they felt unsafe, they felt forgotten, they felt like no one cares in these types of events unless it's cold. We know that when it's cold, we open warming centers and we have all these other things happen. But what happens when it simply rains outside? And like was mentioned by Danielle, I can't even lay on the ground now. So that was some of the feedback that I got from those experiencing homelessness.
I remembered the other thing that we talked about this morning was that basically like when there are like emergency shelters that will open, like emergency like warming centers that will open, a lot of the time the city uses that as a time to specifically close camps because they're like, oh, no one's at this camp, let's take advantage to close it. So people are stuck with the decision of, do I stay at this camp and hold the space and risk literally freezing to death, or do I go on this long multi-hour journey to get to a warming center to have one night of warmth? Because there really is one night of warmth, because by the time you're not even allowed to go there until between 6 and 8 p.m. and then you get separated off to a different shelter, and then you get kicked out at like 6 in the morning. Usually, even though they promise you breakfast, they don't give you breakfast. If a day center is open, then you have to switch to a day center. It's a whole lot of shuffling around of people. And it's all a horrible choice of like, okay, which is more worth it, like getting to keep my camp where I know my safeties, where I know like when I can sleep, versus like when I really need to stay awake, like based on my surroundings, when I know like what streets I can safely walk on, who's going to harass me, like what bathrooms I'm allowed to use versus not allowed to use, what streets like I am able to panhandle on versus not panhandle on, where the buses are. Every time a camp is demolished and someone is forced to move again and again and again, it's like you are like re-forcing that person into homelessness and re-traumatizing that person, because they have to figure out their entire life situation over and over and over again, and do it with just what they can carry on their backs, which oftentimes will get completely destroyed by the time they get to the new camp site that they're able to set up due to inclement weather.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, so we're going to move on to question 4. Because there is so much overlap between your answer to question 3 and some of the things you're starting to say for question 4, Danny, I want to actually start with you for that one. So if you can speak to anything else that you want to say about what would you want to see implemented in the Rain to River plan? And then I also want to just ask you if you can speak to any way that people can help with Queertopia's work.
Okay. So yeah, there's so much stuff can be done. For one, just trash cans, just in general, Austin can put out more trash cans, which would help everyone, not just people experiencing homelessness. And I would love to see the city offering incentives to places like spin zones, so people can do their laundry, because again, once it rains, everyone's clothing are completely destroyed. And just after a couple of days of wearing the same exact thing on the street day in and night out, like your clothing is just completely screwed up. So I'd love to see like spin zone, which is they're particularly friendly to people experiencing homelessness. And like our care packages that we made are they include like a $20 gift card to spin zone. I would love to see like partnerships with the YMCA and maybe even like, I don't know, Planet Fitness or some other gym that has showers, so that people can go and get a decent shower without having to rely on one of those like like mobile showers, which are only stationed at specific areas. There should just be places like all over the city that people can go to without feeling like they're a horrible burden, to get just basic human needs. There should be partnerships with libraries to store people's documents, because like 1, fund more libraries, and 2, like they're they're all over the place. Or maybe like, I don't know, USPS, because they're also all over the place. There should be shelters, not shelters, sorry. I don't think that there should be like more specific shelters for it, but just like more partnerships with places that already exist, so that it's like less like money with infrastructure and more just straight up incentives. um, basically like places to allow people to go when it's storming, like not just when it's freezing, so that like people like so everything isn't destroyed and people's health isn't completely ruined for the next like who knows how long, because like you don't have a bed to sleep in to recover once you get a cold. I'd love to see um sorry, I'm going based on memory. I'd love to see transparency from the city instead of performative uh, action and performative posting online. So like when the warming centers, when they post those like flyers, I would love to see follow-ups on like, okay, this is the amount of people that actually came to the center. This is like, we could really use this many more spaces. Transparency about just how absolutely wild it is to actually get to those warming centers, because people just pass around those flyers as if it's like some easy thing for people to go to, when it's not. It's tremendously difficult to the point where most people do not go, which is why like we're big advocates of bringing warming centers literally like to the camps and to where people are, and like helping like reinforce people's tents and areas, because there's also a lot of people who physically cannot even leave their tent, and we're not doing anything for them when it's cold. I would love to see, yeah, and like and like for example, like you have to take a bus to get to One Texas Center to go to the warming center, but all the buses were closed during this most recent ice storm, and they announced that like Cav Metro announced that they would run their buses as shuttles for people experiencing homelessness to get to One Texas Center, but the the warming centers didn't actually take them up on that, and there was no locations posted for where for people to meet up with the buses. There's no follow through with it, so it was all just performative. There was no transparency. So I would really love to see more transparency. And then as far as like as Fez said, like with the phones, like yeah, like only a very small amount of people even have phones. I would love to see more just like community partners who work with people experiencing homelessness. Like as soon as someone gets like a food stamp, like SNAP award letter or a SSDI benefit letter, immediately take that letter and then get a government phone plan, which is free for the rest of the person's life. Because then they'll have a phone, and anytime they lose the phone, they can just apply for a new one for free. And then like the city can just send out an Amber Alert style when there's going to be inclement weather, so people can get somewhere safely. If those places existed. If those places don't exist, then there's really nothing that can be done still, because they're just going to be shuffling about still.
Thank you so much. Can you share anything, just because we got a question in the, I think because we got a question in the chat, but anything about how people can help with your efforts before we move into the next panelist on this question?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to follow us online, it's probably the easiest way to keep up with what we're doing. Queertopia TX on Instagram or Facebook. You can email us if you want to volunteer, queertopians@gmail. We've been advocating for 2 years at this point for the city to open up a shelter for queer people experiencing homelessness. We personally run a shelter out of my home for the past almost 30 years at this point for queer people experiencing homelessness. We've had over 40 people come here and move on to their housing, most of them. We've gotten over 150, I would say, predominantly Black Austinites connected with resources to get them into housing who were not already connected with any type of resources. We currently pay the rent of 6 Black Austinites from St. John's that were gentrified out of their housing or kicked out of the HEAL program. And we do all this on Instagram donations. We don't have funding at all. This is actually the first grant that we ever received that had any type of administration funds with it. It's only a $5,000 grant. So if you want to help, it would be great. We help literally the most marginalized people in Austin.
Thank you so much, Denny. Wonderful. Okay, so let's move on to Fez. Can you speak to what do you want to see implemented in Rain to River?
All right. So I'm going to start off the top, and this kind of goes back to the first item I mentioned, and that was 311, making sure that we provide a means of just re-educating all of Austin in all walks of life about 311 and the benefits of using it. And for those that may have access issues to phones or electronics, maybe work with the local libraries to provide that access and explain where those services are available. Let that be their entry into that whole system of options available through the city. Speaking on diversity on our bodies of water, I mentioned this before, but looking at offering swimming classes, free swimming classes to those as a real basic life necessity, life skill, being able to swim, so that those who do want to go enjoy the water aren't afraid of falling in the water and not being able to save themselves. So that's another one here. The other was more towards the homelessness side of the house, and that was some type of early warning system for them. And we talked about this before. Finding out those communities that live in certain places. Maybe finding a contact of someone who has a phone and making them be the ambassador, so that when things like this happen, they send a message to them and they alert the rest of the community. So that's one thing I would love to see implemented. For those in kind of the Dove Spring area that really don't trust, Watershed and Austin, and because this was the second time that this event happened, and there were move-outs happening at that time. But from the feedback from those that lived there, it was going very slow. There were a few right before that event, 2 days before. If they'd had 2 more days, they would have been out of their house before this event happened. So having, like was mentioned, more transparency with those communities, maybe hosting an event that covers a disaster plan for what happens if this does take place again. Where do you go? How are we going to report it to you? So on and so forth, just to help instill that confidence. And the next one is more of a overreaching for everything. This ambassador program is great, but I think it was only for about 6 months. And I think it needs to be something that continues. We need to continue to have that development within the communities, especially for those who may not have access to technology. So technology, should not be limited, or access to services and everything that the city offers should not be limited on, how much you make or your access to electronics. So I think for those reasons, we got to have some level of an ambassador to visit these communities and stay in contact with them. And this also goes for the other, because there was one that I really want to crack, and that was getting in with my religious facilities. That was my main goal. Like when I started all this out, it wasn't to focus mainly on those experiencing homelessness, but there were some challenges with getting, some newsletters and things, getting some organized content and things that really just need more time. And I'm going to take that one on myself. I'm not going to blame any of those communities for doing it. It was just my lack of expertise in coming into this and maybe just needing more time. So for those reasons, I think that it's important to maybe keep this program alive so that we keep those doors open and really have a diverse set of voices coming back when things like this come up for debate.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's move on to Mirna. What would you like to see implemented in the Rain to River plan?
Sí, bueno, a mí me gustaría.
Yes. Well, to implement a plan for the city and the community, I would also like, we've discussed everything, but something that stood out to me in the interview is that after every natural disaster, there's something that is very important that many oftentimes people experience like mental health problems like panic attacks, anxiety attacks, and that has really affected us because we lived it in Mendes with the freezing because the community had to respond, or when there's a flooding or the rain comes, people get really anxious, very nervous. People get panic attacks, and I would like to have a platform in English and in Spanish for people with disabilities, for the elderly, and talk about mental health because mental health is really affecting us. I got really nervous. I was one of those people that got very nervous because I live by the river. So every time the rain came, I got really nervous. I have a little boy, and then I have a 25-year-old daughter that um, can is not. I have to carry. She doesn't walk, and I have to carry her out. And she's a resident, so she's not a citizen. So I pay for everything, Pampers and everything. I don't have any more resources or access to resources for her. So it was really hard. So I think that we should have like a disaster planning with the community. Uh, whatever we get from the community, and to have transparency, because as many people say, we don't want to be a figure, we don't want to be a code, we don't want to be a statistic, we want real change so our people don't die, our community doesn't die, and our community doesn't get isolated. So I'm really focusing on the elderly because I lived it in the freeze and in the flooding. So I would like this to be taken into consideration. And yes, I saw people in homeless people arriving at Mendes. I was volunteer there. I had food, I had water, and I saw a lot of people arriving there without shoes, and it was so cold. So one of the activists, Vanessa Fuentes, councilwoman, and Vanessa Fuentes and Francis Acuña were pitching in for medication. It was hard for the city to respond. I don't know what happened, but I would like to see a strategic plan that doesn't fail. Strategic plan for the community, for the most vulnerable people in the community, the most forgotten people in the community. I I would like to address that part. I see more training. I would like to continue the program as ambassador. It's not about the money. I would like to participate so I can talk to the community, get into homeless people, to Latin women, to the people that are forgotten, to the people that are low income. But I would also like to see more people in the parks, community groups, cleaning up parks, cleaning up the rivers. And I would like to see this in the community, because with love, because I love to the community, to homeless people, to the elderly. I felt the discrimination. They pushed me out. They kicked me out during the pandemic from an apartment that was paid for by the government. And I was homeless with my 5 children, with a baby, and my 25-year-old child with disabilities. And this was a government house, and I was homeless. It was awful. I had to change my 25-year-old daughter's Pampers on the street. It was awful. um, I had COVID, and unfortunately the language barrier is there. And I'm sharing that I lived through this because it was one of my worst experiences, most hardest experiences. It was GABA, Workers Defense, Delia Garza, Vanessa Fuentes that helped us not get kicked out. We were eating out on chairs on the street in Villa Carda Lane and Stanley Lane, some apartments in Stanley, and they kicked us out. No mercy. And I'm very grateful to the people that helped it. My child was attacked. She was vulnerable. I say attacked because they took no mercy on her. And there was a flooding, it was hard. So I'm sharing this. Wh- when when I did the interviews, the surveys, I listened to the community. I didn't share what I went through but I'm sharing with you because I love being a community ambassador, and it touched my heart to work with my community. I've done it because I've seen the Dove Screen Recreation Center grow. I've seen our councilwoman work, do a lot of stuff, and Jorge Morales, many community. I love Rainbow River. Whenever I walk by or pass by, I saw the code. I've loved this so much, and I want it to be implemented. I want everything that the community said to be implemented. I want there to be transparency. I want mental health issues to be addressed, and people that are forgotten to get to be, so that the city can get to the people that are forgotten. We have more access to 311. We have more bilingual uh, staff, because that's why I got kicked out with my 25-year-old woman daughter, and I had to change her pampers on the street, and all of my kids were like covering, like blocking the view so people wouldn't see her on the street. So I would really like planning, because lately everything like climate change is bad, tornadoes, flooding, fires, warming, and homeless people, the women that don't have a house, single moms, uh, getting to public transportation. Some people are homeless, and even though I had a husband, he had COVID, and I was homeless, and I've seen all these women, and I'm always at the library in Dome Spring helping women, taking them to the clinics and several places. And there's all these barriers. I love the rivers, I love the lakes. We also need more restrooms for people that are homeless, and we need good communication with between 311 and the community and the city, and we need transparency. I don't want to become a statistic. I think it's a great dream, and I am betting everything on this. And I've been very happy about what the community has said. The community has said, and because I have interviewed people from different organizations, and I think Rain to River and the city are going to do a great job if they come together, the city and the community, because the community is going to express their needs, and I think it would be a great team. And I would also love to see more training for ambassadors. I think there's many Latin ambassadors, and I saw it during the floodings, and I was in Jorge Morales Park, and those they're volunteers. There's a lot of volunteers that we go out there to clean, and we are willing to lift up our community, and that's
That's
where we
where
live.
we live. So this is what I would like to see, but especially to implement a program and also put attention to mental health, because that creates panic, fear, isolation. What's going to happen? My belongings, my family, food. Where am I going to go? All of that. That's something really touched me, and I would like to see implemented a website for an emergency, more resources, and more community ambassadors to have training so they can work, so we can work together.
Thank you so much, Mirna, for sharing all of that. Very important and even personal information to help us kind of learn more about what we can do in this process. So with that, we're done with our questions for the panelists. And now we want to hear questions from you, our audience. We want to hear what questions you have for our panelists. So as Sam mentioned earlier, please use the Zoom Q&A widget to ask your questions, and we'll answer as many as time allows. We do have one on deck already. I guess before I jump into the questions, there is one comment that somebody put in the chat that we wanted to share with Mirna. Can you please tell Mirna thank you for giving voice to the unseen and unheard? Her passion is invaluable. Please give her a hug too. She has me in tears. I wanted to pass that along. Okay, the question that we have is for Danny, and it is, how concerned are you for the future of the city and programs like this? I guess I'm not sure if that means Queertopia or Rain to River, but sorry, I'll start over. How concerned are you for the future of the city and programs like this under the new city management? Specifically, the new assistant city manager who oversees watershed, as he was the assistant police chief for 27 years and worked for Governor Abbott, was obviously not for helping the unhoused community other than to make them disappear. Would you like to answer that?
Sorry, you want me to answer that? I didn't know if you said that you were going to talk a little bit. Okay.
No, yeah, you seem like it's for you.
Yeah, sorry. Also, I have 3 dogs and they're all barking at the same time. So I'm just like, okay. I have 0 faith in the city. I have watched the city shut down and throw elderly Black folks and entire families, including children, out of their camps in the pouring rain. I've watched the city sign off on camps continuing to be swept after finding a dead woman in her tent, and literally, once the body was removed, just picking up the whole tent with a crane and disposing of it. The entire city council had to sign off on the city hall camp, which was tremendously clean because we demanded garbage cans everywhere and had little like crews doing different things, working communally together. And we followed every rule to make sure no one was getting arrested. City Hall, every member of City Council signed off on APD sending 50 officers to violently arrest multiple members of the unhoused community. And then claimed that we knew for a month that we were going to get closed when we knew for 12 hours. I have no faith in this city. We've been asking them for 2 years to prioritize Black people and queer people, and everything they do is performative. It's an insult that there was a Hispanic queer woman running for mayor, and instead we chose someone that was already the mayor. And now and then the city manager, which is frankly a job that shouldn't even exist. It's like a $400,000 a year job. Is the person who used to have that job? No. So I'm very concerned. The city thinks that they're going to just like end homelessness. They operate on a completely competitive mindset fueled by capitalism instead of operating collaboratively with organizations that have been doing this for a long time and who are trusted in the community. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
I think so.
We'll just keep getting pushed out further and further. I mean, it's South by Southwest this weekend. I just went and talked to one of my favorite people downtown, and he has a tent, and it's gonna get swept away before South by starts on Friday. So he's gonna be displaced again. And I just found him, and he's on he's on like a housing wait list for people who like can't be found by their case managers. And I keep being like, this is where his tent is, go right here to find his tent. And now they're not gonna be able to go there because city only cares about beautifying the city for tourists.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that so honestly and critically. It's helpful. Okay, so we have one more question. This is going to be our last question, and I'm going to ask each of you to answer it. So I guess since we haven't been starting with Mirna, let's start with Mirna this time. So the question is, what can the watershed department do to build a long-term relationship with the communities you worked with? And then I'll ask each of you to answer.
¿Qué puede hacer la ciudad?
So what the city can do, I think the first of all, the community and the city should have trainings, wide trainings for the city to start organizing groups with the community so the community can start trusting the city, so the community knows that the city is there for them, because it will be only 40, 50 years thinking that they and trying to really change the fear, the lack of trust. That's what I will like, that the city will tell the community, here we are, we're going to work with you to try to grow the community that you want, and but we need your help. If there is no connection between the community and the city, nothing will happen. Nothing will happen because they are disconnected. They need to lose the fear, the distrust, and the feeling that the city doesn't do anything, that they are isolated, not because they don't have rights, because they are a Latino community or community of color, or because they don't have, they are homeless, or because they are different gender. That's very difficult because I lived it in the 204 surveys. I lived that. So a good relationship is a good training with the community and the city, training community leaders that can come and talk to the groups that the city cannot reach. But there are leaders that are ready to really reach their community. There are so many leaders that will give everything for their community. So it is a time to train those leaders so they can reach places that that the city cannot reach, because they want to empower the people. Nobody wants to be displaced. Unfortunately, in Austin, we see people from all over, and and always the rich people are the ones who have power, and the people of color, the poor, are living. They're going to Bastrop, Del Valle, to areas where they can live. So it's difficult. So what I think is that, and the city will think about a structure of community and leaders and ambassadors and the city, so they can speak with the community. And I think it will be a big change. This is something that I believe 100%, because the city cannot do it by themselves. They understand the panic, the fear, all the disaster that they have lived. They have lived. They people who have lost everything in their papers. They have seen their children crying of hunger. So they can tell how they will be working together. If the city doesn't have that connection, it's going to be really difficult to reach the community. They need to really join, and together there will be a big change. And that's my opinion because I lived it. I saw that. Uh, I've seen it when we go on door knocking. They don't want to hear about the city. So to really close the gap of distrust, that will be a huge achievement, because each person of the community will really contribute to something important, and they will also empower the neighbors, and then also help, taking the people to the school, to the laundromat. There are people who are marginalized. They have lack help, people who have really suffered, and that they say that they were drinking water out of the swimming pool. So I would like to have a connection
Thank you so
between the
much, Dana.
city and the
Okay,
community.
we're almost out of time, so I want to ask Danielle, Danny, to speak to it, if you can, in just 2 minutes, and then we'll ask Fez to do the same. So again, it's what can the watershed department do to build a long-term relationship with the communities you worked or work with?
I mean, I think that more can be done in general for people before they are gentrified out of their housing to help with like the infrastructure of their homes so they don't need to feel like they need to sell them. I know that there is funds for that. It's not, the knowledge isn't getting out there to people. And so like during awful weather, like their homes are getting more and more damaged. And then they sell them and then they're knocked down and just like those random uncultured houses go up and white people move in. Or else they default and on their property taxes or whatever and fall into homelessness. So I just think more can be done before people are, hitting that point. And I think just in general, like transparency with people experiencing homelessness is the biggest possible thing. Transparency and following up. So like, I mean, we spoke about a lot of different things that can be implemented. Like, I mean, another thing is like putting like phone chargers like at every single bus stop. That way, like anyone who needs to charge their phone that lives on the streets has somewhere that they can actually do it. That way they're getting the notifications from the city that there's going to be inclement weather. I think just like the unhoused population notices immediately when they're listened to and when action is being taken to better their lives. So like if they notice that Rain to River is like, hey, what do you need help with? Okay, we're listening. We're gonna do X, Y, and Z. And then X, Y, and Z actually happens. So they will immediately notice. Whereas instead, right now, what the community is seeing is news reports constantly of like extreme amounts of money coming into Austin for homelessness. And each individual person is like, well, I'm not seeing any result from that money. So the city must just be like abusing it. Because there's no transparency to tell people on the streets other than just like, well, you have to wait your turn. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, Fez, can you finish this out? I'll read the question one more
Yes.
time. Or do you have it? Or
I think I have it. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll make it quick because I know we're very close on time here. So I think the biggest thing is really partnering more with the community and really spreading the message wide. And I think how to help facilitate that, starting with the diversity on the bodies of water. Why not partner with the Parks Division and host events where you teach swimming classes, or partner with other organizations. We have representation for Black women who kayak. Partner with those organizations and hosting events. Also to educate more on the 311, do more events at the rec centers. Like make it a full fun day of things of folks just coming out, and also take the opportunity to educate them. Also provide results. So when they provide feedback on these things or they're concerned about things, make sure you action and bring that feedback back. If you want the trust of them, you've got to bring something back. If they're giving you something, you got to have something in return. So I think those are the three things I think that'll really help kind of win that over, and what we can do to partner and get better on that.
Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
Awesome. All right. So we want to close out. You're hearing, I'm at home, my baby's in the background, so if that's what's going on. But we want to end with an ask to please take our survey. We're wrapping up the first phase of community engagement for Rain to River, and we're closing our survey, our first survey, March 31st. So you can access it by going to raintoriveratx.com. That's the easiest way to get there. You can also use the QR code on the screen, and we would love it if you could share this with your networks. We want a big last push of survey responses by the 31st, and we want to hear from everybody. So that would be amazing. And then with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sam to close us out. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So this concludes our Imagine Austin Speaker Series webinar today. This was a huge lift by so many different people, so I want to make sure that we give a big thank you to our partners with the Watershed Protection Department, Sari, Bobby, and Aaron. Also with our wonderful panelists, thank you so much for sharing your stories, sharing your points of view, Fez, Mirna, and Danny. Our interpreters, Susanna and Susanna, thank you so much for, I also have a small dog who's jumping up to say hi, so she's coming up right now. Our interpreters, Susanna and Susanna, thank you so much for your hard work. I know how difficult it is to, in real time, translate, especially for those of us who might be speaking fast. And I just realized I'm probably speaking very fast, so let's slow down. And then the rest of our team over at both Housing and Planning and Watershed Protection Department, who have put in so much effort, whether it is working to promote the event, whether it is working to collect questions and have those available for y'all. Last, I just want to say thank you so much for everyone who came and attended today. We really appreciate it. This is an event for you all. This event would not exist without you all. So thank you so much for coming, for listening, hopefully for learning and for asking your questions. And we hope to see you again at future Imagine Austin Speaker Series events. Thank you so much.